For this afternoon and tonight, a significant winter storm, including heavy snow with limited drinking.
Hello, and welcome to the SnowBrains podcast, where it's my job to interview the most intelligent people in the snow sports industry and pass their fascinating knowledge onto you, our listeners. I'm your host, Miles Clark. I'm a professional free skier, a mountain guide, an Alaska heli ski guide, a UC Berkeley molecular cell biology graduate, the founder and CEO of SnowBrains. And back in October 2012, I found myself deep in China in a town called Shangri-La. I'd been surfing and trekking through Tibet, China, and Indonesia all summer, and it was time to head home. I needed to be in Kunming the next day for a flight. Unbeknownst to me, it was National Week in China, and I couldn't get a flight or a bus or a train anywhere. Everything was sold out. At my wit's end, I started walking down the highway with my thumb out. Pure desperation. This is not something you do in China. After about an hour, I was starting to lose all hope when a man pulled over and picked me up. He didn't speak a word of English, nor I a word of Chinese. We tried to talk to each other with very little success, but he took me down the road to Lijiang, where I grabbed a bus to Kunming and made my flight to Hong Kong. Along the way, we laughed a lot, and we stopped for lunch, and he ordered me the best meal I had during my entire month in China. Some kind of red stew that was delectable. Thank you so much for the ride, kind sir. This episode of the SnowBrains podcast is brought to you by Club Med. Are you ready for an unforgettable ski getaway that takes care of everything? And I mean everything. Head to one of Club Med's mountain resorts where you can experience the thrill of the slopes without worrying about a thing. With their all-inclusive packages, you'll get all your lift tickets, ski passes, ski and snowboard lessons for all ages and ski levels, delicious meals, exciting apres-ski activities, and even childcare for the kids, all included in the price. So you can focus on what matters most, carving perfect turns and enjoying the breathtaking views. Visit www.clubmed.us or call 1-800-CLUB-MED or call your travel advisor to book your ski escape today. My guest today is Jeremy Bloom. Jeremy is the CEO of the X Games. He's a former World Cup freestyle skier who had a ton of success on the tour. Jeremy was also a college football star at CU Boulder, who even played in the NFL. He's also a successful entrepreneur and author. Hello, Jeremy. Welcome to the show. Thank you very, very much for being here, man. I'm a huge fan. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Good. When did you ski last?
Oh man, it's been a couple weeks. There's been so much travel and kids 4 and 2, new job. So just trying to think. I think more than a couple weeks. It was in December.
Is that normal for you these days? Because I know you're so busy.
Normally, I get about 20 days on snow around there. I think this year is going to be a little bit lighter because of the new job,
Right.
primarily.
Well, I definitely want to learn more about the new job. So today I'm really excited to talk to you about your incredible World Cup career, your college football glory, playing in the NFL, you being the new CEO of the X Games, and especially I'm curious about your vision there. But to start, I really, and personally, on a personal level, I really want to hear your quick and dirty life story. So you can tell this in however long or short as you want, but I'd love to hear the quick and dirty life story if that's cool.
Yeah, I spent the first 10 years of my life losing to my brother and sister at everything. And that really shaped sort of who I am, I think, upon reflection. But yeah, youngest of three, grew up in a outdoors type of family. We loved being outside. We didn't watch TV unless the Denver Broncos were playing or it was the
Ooh,
Olympics. Like that's
nice.
all we watched. And maybe the Grammys a couple years, but that's it. Everything was a competition. My dad was a real competitive guy and loves to compete. He was a wrestler in high school, state champion, and
Wow.
it made it fun, but it wasn't fun for me because as the youngest, I lost at everything at my brother and sister's. So didn't matter if it was the 5K race or the bike ride or the hike. They were bigger, faster, stronger. And I think I learned those 10 years that if I wanted to win at anything, I had to put in more work, had to put in more effort, had to show up before my brother and sister, had to show up later. And my dad would sort of help coach me because all I ever wanted to do in my life was beat my brother and sister at something. And today I'm painfully driven. I'm a painfully driven type of person. I've never had a hard time being the first person to show up to practice, the last to leave. That metaphor sort of rings true to my professional career at building Integrate, which is the startup that I built and sold in 2021, or Wish of a Lifetime, the charity, or trying to be the best dad I can. I just think there's no shortcuts in life, and you get in what you put out.
I love that. And you did brush over my favorite pieces, which is being a World Cup skier and a football star. You're kind of one of my heroes because of those two things. I followed you really close back then. And so I'm going to ask you a lot about them, but I do want to start with diving more into the new CEO of X Games situation. So let's just start with the blunt question of what is your core mission as the new CEO of the X Games?
Well, back up just quickly, and then I'll definitely approach that question. Most people don't realize that the X Games is no longer owned by ESPN. The X Games is owned by private equity. And
Okay.
so MSP Sports Capital came in and bought the X Games from ESPN about 2.5 years ago. And these are some really incredible guys. So
Mm,
MSP Sports Capital owns the controlling interest in McLaren F1. They own a big part of the Phoenix Suns, and they own a bunch of pro soccer teams over in Europe. So very successful guys, sports guys, sort of through and through. And the vision was to launch the world's first action sports league. So
mm.
team sports, team environment, selling teams, bringing in other private equity shops to own teams. The world's first action sports draft is forthcoming at X Games, both a winter draft and
Whoa.
a summer draft. Also, sport expansion. We're looking at a number of sports to add to summer X Games and winter X Games. And so I was really brought in to bring this incredible vision to life. And so that's sort of what we're working on. It's a different chapter of X Games, as you know, and as a lot of people will know. X Games has been around for 30 years. It's the Super Bowl of action sports. Most athletes will tell you it's bigger for them than even the Olympics. It's an iconic brand and it's a global brand. We reach 192 countries around the world. We have over 1 billion impressions across all of our events and content on an annual basis. And
Yeah.
we have some of the most marketable and most incredible athletes in the world. People like Eileen Gu, who, by the way, is the second highest female earning athlete in the world across any sport, $22 million a year. And she's a
Wow.
skier. And we have the best skateboarders in the world, BMX riders in the world, skiers and snowboarders. And in a nutshell, that's what we are.
Well, that's incredible. So, who came up with this idea of the league? I thought maybe it was you bringing that in, but it sounds like it was already established.
I can take no credit for that vision. That's really the MSP Sports Capital folks, John Najaffi and Jeff Morad.
Hmm.
And I think the vision was really born out of certainly their experience across their entire professional careers in sports. Morad was the CEO of the San Diego Padres. He was Lee Steinberg's partner for many, many years as the number one baseball and football agent in the world. But primarily, it was really their experience with F1. Over the last 7 years, they've seen an amazing amount of value creation take forth at F1. And what was an individual sport really morph into a team sport with the Constructor Cup, which is the team aspect of F1. And they were fortunate enough to win the Constructor Cup this year. So it was a great year for MSP and McLaren. And I think they saw a great opportunity to take that to action sports.
Well, I'm really interested in their vision here. So, could you elaborate on the X Games League and how it, especially how it's different from the previous X Games that we all know and love?
Yeah, I mean, when we launch the league, people watching X Games, there will be a lot of similarities. For example, we'll still hand out individual X Games gold medals to whoever won the super pipe, whoever won the slopestyle. But the way that the team sport will work is you'll have a team ownership group, you'll have a GM that runs that team, and you'll have a draft, and you'll have 10 athletes, five women, five male athletes. And everything that they do scores points for their teams. Podiums are the way that you score points. As a GM or a team owner, you're going to want to draft the 10 athletes who have the best chance of getting on the podium across whatever sport that they do. And instead of 2 events a year, we're going to build into 8 events a year, to 10 events a year, to 15 events a year over
Wow.
the next 5 to 10 years. So we're really taking this brand across the world. We're going global, and we're sort of working on how to best do that over the next couple years.
Wow. And so you're saying there's going to be 8 or 10 events and all over the world. Are you able to share any of those locations? Where are they hoping to have these events?
Yeah, I can share some of the cities that have put forth official bids. So for the past about 10 months, we've run an official bid process for the X Games. We've gone to cities all over the world and invited cities to bid on bringing X Games, either summer or winter, to their cities. And in part of that, they help to underwrite the cost of doing so. And so about 35 cities have submitted official bids. It's everywhere from Bali, Indonesia, to Shanghai, China, to Sydney,
Wow.
Australia, to South America, to St. Moritz, Switzerland for the winter. It's really all over the world. It's truly global. And so, we're in the process of figuring out what the 26, 27, and 28 event calendar will look like.
And are we talking about some new events as well? Because you mentioned Bali, so I want to see surfing.
Yeah, a lot of people want surfing. So we're having those conversations. Surfing certainly feels like a natural extension to everything that we do at X Games. World Surf League is a great league and incredible athletes. I think for us, the Northern Star of expansion, as long as it's on brand of what action sports is, if there's a built-in global audience, if the answer of that is yes,
Yes,
and
definitely.
and there's partnership sales revenue, so corporate America or worldwide corporations supporting this sport, then if both of those answers are yes, it's a great idea for us to expand into. And the way that we're going to expand into new sports is through a new part of our events called Spotlight Events. So, what people will see, even in Salt Lake City, which is the weekend of June 27th, you'll see new sports as part of Summer X Games. Now, they won't be league events, they won't be core events. That'll be BMX, skateboard, and moto. But we will begin to introduce spotlight events, which could be surfing, could be other sports. And we're really curious to see what our athletes think about those spotlight events, what our fans think about those spotlight events. And ultimately, there will be a defined path for a spotlight event to become a league event if it's successful.
Oh, cool. So it sounds like a way to test these events. And that seems like a really great way to do it, especially when
Exactly.
it is at an event and it's live, so you can get real feedback in real time. I guess the answer to this question is kind of obvious, but I am curious. I love that the idea that these cities are putting out some of the cost, are going to pay for some of the cost. And so what would you say is in it for these cities?
Well, I mean, when we come to town, we bring, I think 15 to 20 million dollars was the estimate in Sacramento when we worked with the city.
Whoa.
So, hotels and restaurants, I mean,
Hmm.
especially in the summer footprint, over 120,000 fans will go through the entrance gate at our summer events. And then there's a lot of value. We're on live TV, ESPN, ABC, streaming live on Roku. If you look at the Aspen numbers, we had some of the best linear numbers we've seen in 10 years, which is pretty impressive. And we had a great streaming platform on as well. So good branding and attention to the cities, great experience for fans to go and take part. And our athletes fly from all over the world to compete in this. So economic value for the city as we come to town.
That's beautiful, man. So walk me through an event because I still don't have a really concrete picture. So I think maybe an event like half pipe. I think everybody's really comfortable and familiar. The half pipe comps at X Games are insane. So what does the half pipe event look like in the X Games League format?
It'll look the exact same as it looked like in Aspen. And in Aspen, we tested a new format, and the format was playoffs and finals.
Hmm.
So we invite 8 athletes to participate. They got 2 runs. The top 4 went to finals. The top 4 had 2 runs to win X Games gold. And that's part of our effort of evolving X Games into something that's a bit more, I think, compelling and more pressure packed. Sometimes when you watch X Games in the past, it could look like you're watching practice,
Mm.
15 hours across ESPN and ABC. Cool practice, but sort of practice. And so we're envisioning a format that's a bit more compelling, I think, and shorten some of the cycles. But even if it's a league event, so you'll see the chances are all of those 8 athletes will be drafted athletes. So they'll
Hmm.
be part of one team, or they'll have teammates. And then whoever wins gets 10 points for their team. Whoever gets second gets 5 points for the team. Whoever gets third gets 3 points for their team. And then they can go watch their teammates go ski in the super pipe or do the big air and cheer for their teammates so that they can get them points.
And would points accumulate across different events or is it just half
Yes.
pipe? Okay.
Nope. Across the whole winter framework.
Okay, but would it be more than so? Is it just half pipe is one event and there's one set of points for that, and then slope style is a whole other separate
That's
competition
correct.
essentially?
Yep.
Okay,
And then at the end of the event, you add up all the points for teams, and then you put the standings on there, and you have probably 4 locations to go to. And at the end of the year, that fourth location becomes the season championship.
Really interesting. I mean, it's going to feel more like basketball in a way where, injuries and all these other things are going to come
Yeah.
in. And then I don't know if you guys are going to allow trades mid-season or you'll have a trade deadline. But yeah, I think I really like the idea of this. Would there be, towards the end, would there be playoffs and finals as well?
Playoffs and finals will just be a format to crown a champion. That format will stay the same across all four events.
Okay, nice. So in a way, I'm kind of thinking of how the World Surf League works. There's not exactly a playoffs. It's just whoever has the most points at the end. Maybe the World Cup ski circuits are like that too.
Yeah.
Whoever has the most points at the end wins. But those last few comps are like the playoffs by de facto, right? Because if it's close, it really is important on who does what and when. Well, this sounds really exciting, man. Sounds like a totally different idea, especially in this action sports kind of a thing. And how do you see this relating to other comps that are kind of like this, like the natural selection tour and some of the other sort of outdoor extreme events that are going on or leagues that are going on?
Yeah, there's some startups too. The Snow League that Sean White started, there's Natural Selection, there's Nitrous Circus. And the way that we look at it at X Games is this is the tide that lifts all boats. When these sort of events are successful and they draw a big crowd or a lot of attention, it helps bring more eyeballs to our athletes, which we think is a good thing, especially at X Games. We're an athlete first league. We start and end every decision we make. Is this good or bad for our athletes? We really see it as our responsibility to bring action sports back into the mainstream. Once upon a time, I think it was. If you think about X Games in 2010 era, it really was mainstream. You had Metallica playing at our shows. You had Snoop Dogg showing
Mm.
up, and it was this big global movement. And then things changed and priorities changed inside of ESPN. And one thing that didn't change is how iconic our brand is. But now we have a full-time dedicated team thinking about this every day. In fact, I just hired the number two at the WNBA to come run our league, and she did
Oh,
something
wow.
very similar for the past 5 years. So building an incredible team, people that love action sports, that love the X Games, but are also top one percenters in their career. And from there, it'll just come down to our ability to execute.
So you mentioned that it's athlete first league. What kind of support are you guys going to or hoping to offer to athletes? Might there be initiatives implemented to support athletes beyond competition, like health insurance or travel stipends and things like this?
Yeah, so the way it works right now, if you're a drafted athlete, you get put on salary. And that's
Mm.
the first time an action sports athlete has ever been put on salary in the history of action sports. So you can imagine the excitement from our athletes of the idea of getting drafted and getting a salary, just like Major League Baseball or a basketball player where you get drafted and you're put on salary. As part of that, there's a health insurance stipend. If you're a drafted athlete, all of your sort of food, hotels, travel expenses are also paid for. And you've been around these sports long enough to know that's a big change. That's a
That's
monumental
huge.
shift. I mean, that doesn't even happen at the Olympic level across all U.S. team athletes. I've been on the board at U.S. skiing for 9 years, and that's something we've always aspired to do, but haven't really been able to execute. So that's great for athletes, and the athletes are pretty excited about that.
I love this. I really like the idea that there's the salary, and this makes it feel more like a real league. Like when you think of the National Basketball Association, the NFL, Major League Soccer, and Major League Baseball, these folks, they don't come into the league without a contract and a salary.
Right.
So that's really exciting. Tell me a little bit about the draft. I don't have a good idea of how this draft works. Is it annual? How does that work?
So we're targeting four winter teams and four summer teams.
Okay.
10 athletes apiece. There'll be a winter draft for those 10 athletes across those four teams. And then from there, there's not going to be a draft every year because there's no feeder league. There's no college football player that's now ready for the NFL. These are the best of the best. But what will happen is there will be subsequent drafts after the first draft for spotlight events that become league events. So
Mm,
take it surfing or fill in the blank, whatever. And if that does well and our ownership groups vote to approve that as a league event, then that year there will be, for example, a surfing draft. And all of our owners will then be able to draft athletes in surfing to add to their teams and so forth.
very cool. So it sounds like somewhere around 8 events, 4 teams. Do the teams, are they regional? Do they have names yet? How are we going to learn about that
Yep.
piece of it?
Teams will be anchored to cities.
Oh,
And
cool.
owners get to choose. An owner can choose LA, they could choose Chicago, New York, Paris, Barcelona, whatever. But once an ownership group chooses a city, that city's now off the map. So it's a
Got
bit
it.
of an incentive for early team owners to come in early pick their city, pick their branding, pick their marketing, pick their merch. They own full licensing control of their teams, but they will be anchored to cities.
Wow, that's really exciting, man. It's going to be so cool to see athletes. I guess before I'm getting ahead of myself, did you say yes or no to trading? Will that be a piece of this?
Yeah, we're working through how that should work right now. And
Okay.
Andy, who joined us from the WNBA, is really sort of working with powers to be to try to figure that out, and some of our early ownership groups. There will be a mechanism of trading, there will be a mechanism of free agency. A lot of athletes competing at X Games will be undrafted free agents, right?
Hmm.
Because if you think about Winter X Games, there's about 100 athletes. Only
Okay.
40 of them will be drafted in the first year. So 60 of them will be free agents, which will be cool for them too, because if they impress the ownership group, they could get signed to a team and put on salary. So we're working through all that.
And if someone gets injured and they're out for the season, they could be replaced.
Exactly. At the draft, you'll be able to draft 10 athletes, but you'll also be able to sign 2 or 3 free agents
Mm.
that think of them as alternates. So if somebody, or think of it as like a practice squad for a football team. If somebody gets injured, you can call that free agent up and put them on the team.
Wow, I love this, man. This is really exciting. You must be losing it. Figuring out all these details sounds like really fun, but also really grueling work. You guys have your work cut out for you. When is the first event?
The only thing I'm losing is losing sleep.
Oh,
But
I bet, dude. I
I
bet.
don't think I've slept in 4 months since
Oh my
but
God.
we're making really good progress now and bringing in incredible team and had some incredible people here already. So we're really getting there and starting to move really quickly. But the family hasn't seen me too much over the past couple months, which we need to change.
It'll stabilize at some point.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when do you hope the first event goes off?
So the plan is to launch the league summer 2026.
Great. Okay. So relatively soon.
Yeah, just over a year.
So I did read something about innovation and technology. There's a little bit of, I think they call it owl AI, but there's
Mhm.
AI judging. Are you guys looking into any of that stuff for this X Games League?
Yeah, we are. Our goal is to make sure that all of our events are fair and
Hmm.
no human bias ever determines a winner or a loser. Look, I've been part of judge sports my whole life. The 2 Olympics for Team USA, and freestyle skiing is a judge sport. It's not just who gets past the finish line first, it's what a panel of 7 judges who they think won and who they thought lost. And best, sometimes humans get it wrong, and worse, sometimes there's more to the story. We've seen the Russian judge scandal. We just saw last month that Major League Baseball fired an ump for sports betting. And so there's all these sort of reasons that potentially some of these events are not objective and they're subjective. 10 years ago, we didn't have the technology to try to go solve this. We do today. And my background, yes, it's sports, but it's also tech. I was a tech CEO for 13 years before coming to X Games and have very close friends at the senior leadership level of Google. And I called them when I got the job. I said, let's go build the world's first AI judge. And we debuted that AI judge in Aspen called the Owl. You can see more at theowl.ai. We uploaded a bunch of photos and videos and sort of talked about how we calibrated it. But one of the things that we asked the Owl to do is watch practice of the Super Pipe finals. So watch all the athletes in practice and guess who was going to win first, second, and third. And on live TV, it guessed first, second, and third correctly. And so
Wow.
it was pretty amazing because the Owl didn't actually judge that event in Aspen. We just used it as sort of a beta test. And power of AI is incredible. And not only does the Owl objectively score some of these events, but it can also commentate in local languages. So you can say, commentate this run in Japanese so that Japanese fans can get closer to our league. It can
Oh,
do it in
wow.
French, it can do it in Portuguese, and it can also splice highlight video reels in real time. So, our ability to put our highlight reels on TikTok and Snapchat, making sure that we put our content where our fans want to consume it, becomes a real possibility when you have this type of technology.
This episode of the SnowBrains podcast is brought to you by Club Med. Calling all skiers and snowboarders, escape to the snowy peaks of Europe, Japan, China, or Canada with Club Med. Their more than 20 all-inclusive mountain resorts offer unparalleled convenience and endless adventures. Explore world-class ski resorts, indulge in authentic gourmet dining, and unwind with lively apres-ski activities. Let Club Med take care of everything so you can simply relax and enjoy your ski getaway. Visit www.clubmed.us or call 1-800-CLUB-MED or call your travel advisor to discover your ski paradise. I don't want to dive too deep into this. It could take up a lot of time, but how does it work? How does the OWL AI judge skiers and snowboarders?
So basically, we took Gemini, which is the AI platform inside of Google, and we programmed it for snowboarding. And we uploaded thousands of hours of video, and it's all prompt engineering. So as long as you are good at telling it what to do and coaching it when it gets it wrong. And then we uploaded the judging framework for Superpipe. So it knew all the tricks, it knew the degree of difficulty, it knew the fundamentals of how snowboarding is scored in the Superpipe. And then we brought in athletes and even our head judge at X Games to work on the project. So we had to give it a lot of love, a lot of attention, a lot of videos. We had to program it, coach it to what we want it to be. But then after that, it showed up really well.
I mean, I assume it's just getting better daily, essentially. And I could ask so many questions. I think this is so fascinating, but I'll just ask one more question. How big was your team that worked on the AI?
Well, we were lucky because, Google really helped us. And so I don't know the
Mm.
exact number of engineers, but we had support all the way up from co-founder Sergey to Thomas Kurian, who runs cloud, to Josh, who runs AI. It was like the who's who of Google around our table. And we had 6 weeks to build it. And so it was all
Wow.
hands on deck, moving really, really fast. Because everybody knew we weren't just building this, we are going to put it on live TV, ABC and ESPN at Winter X Games.
Wow. All right. Again, I could go on and on, but let's move on to Roku. I think
Yeah.
this is really great, obviously, really great situation for you folks. So, how is this partnership with Roku going to change the way X Games is consumed? And are there any other streaming platforms that are being considered?
Yeah, I mean, viewing behaviors have obviously changed over the past decades, right? Especially with the younger audience, and younger fans are not consuming on linear TV anymore. In fact, I spoke at UCLA last week and I asked 200 students to raise their hand if they had cable, and not a single student raised their hand. So, look, like whether they're consuming on their social media platforms or whether they're consuming on streaming, it's really important for us at X Games. We see it our responsibility to put our content where they want to consume it, not to make them responsible for finding us. And Roku is really the front door of streaming. I mean, 80 million subscribers globally, over a billion impressions on a daily basis. And one of the great things we did with Roku is we made it free. So you didn't even have to have a Roku account. It was ungated content to watch our sport live. So
Wow.
yeah, we continue to be very excited about the Roku agreement. The other thing that it allows us to do is simultaneously show the event on linear TV because some of our fans are there. In fact, 6 million people watched across ABC and ESPN at Aspen, which was one of our best performances on linear over the last 10 years. And
Jeez.
so, like in real time, it's on Roku. So if you're a younger demographic, or if you're a cord cutter, and you can watch there. But if you're somebody that still has cable and you love the X Games, and you could still watch on ABC and ESPN.
And just in case some of our listeners aren't familiar with it, could you just tell us what Roku is?
Yeah, Roku is a streaming platform. And where Roku is a bit more unique is you can access other streaming platforms through Roku. So you can sign on to Roku and watch Netflix or Amazon Prime, some of these other streaming platforms. So it really is the front door of streaming.
Absolutely. I have one. I love it. So, and I've had one for a while. Thinking of challenges and opportunities for you folks moving forward at the X Games, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing X Games in the coming years, and how might you address those?
I think the biggest challenge, some of the biggest challenges for us is the media rights internationally. As I mentioned,
Mm.
192 countries watch the X Games and want our
Wow.
content. So when you think about licensing agreements, it can get really tricky, especially across linear. And so reimagining what our media rights deal looks like in 26 and beyond is both a challenge and a huge opportunity. I think we have an untapped opportunity to really tap into some of these other countries, these major markets like Japan, like China, like Australia, in a way that's more meaningful and easier for them to access. And look, some of the best athletes in the world come from those countries. So that's a challenge, but also an opportunity. I think the other big challenge is creating a business out of this, right? So if you think about ESPN, it sat inside of ESPN for 28 years. They weren't trying to make a business out of X Games. They were just building a brand. And they
Mm.
did an incredible job building this iconic brand that people love and adore. But building a brand while also building a business model is a challenge. And it's a great challenge for us to try to figure out as we grow out the league.
That's exciting because you got to answer both questions. I think that is the challenge, right? Getting this thing to work and be a business, be global. And that's the opportunity too, right? Is once it does work and it's global, 192 countries. I mean, there's not a lot more countries than that already on
Yeah.
Earth. So that's pretty amazing. You mentioned it three times, and forgive my ignorance, when you say in linear, what does that mean?
Oh, linear TV is cable TV.
Oh,
So
that's what you mean. Okay,
it's the
got it.
cable box where Comcast, you turn on the Comcast box and you find your way to, ESPN.
Fantastic. Wow. Well, I want to move on to talk about your personal life a little bit. Is there anything else you want to share about the X Games here?
No, let's go.
I first noticed you as a kid because we might not be too different in age. I was born in 78 and I loved watching you. You were a World Cup mogul skier. And I'm just going to rattle off some numbers here. So at 15, you became the youngest male freestyle skier to ever make the US ski team. You had 12 wins on the World Cup, 26 podiums, 11 World Cup gold medals. You were in the Olympics in 2006 and 2002. Three world championships, including a golden dual moguls in 2003. And you set a record with six consecutive World Cup wins in the 2004-2005 season. That I remember that. That was really exciting. You're already on the US Ski and Snowboard Hall of Fame in 2012. And I think you were the youngest freestyle skier to be inducted into that hall. Pretty amazing. And there's more. I could go on. But I guess I kind of want to start with what was it like being on the US ski team at the tender age of 15?
It was amazing. I mean, I hadn't even left the country before I made the US ski team. And then the first place I went was Tokyo, Japan. And that place was a different world.
Oh
And
man,
but then I was going to Scandinavia and all this, as a 15, 16-year-old, which is pretty young.
really
And
young.
that life experience, I think, really helped shape me. And I just felt so grateful to have that experience. And then to get paid to ski is pretty crazy. I mean, it was a pinch me moment every single day where it was like, wow, people want to pay me to ski, to snow ski. Like, that's my job. Like, how cool is that? Now, there's the downside of it too. There's a ton of pressure in these sports,
Oh
especially
yeah.
somebody that cared as deeply as I did. So it was a bit, it always felt like life or death, whether I was winning or losing. And that can take a toll on you mentally. And it certainly did. And I think it's the reason that no matter what the sport is or who you talk to, it could be the world's best surfer. Most people would say surfing is a fun recreational sport that they'd love to get paid for, or golf or tennis. Those
Hmm.
athletes will tell you at some point it becomes a job, and it's very easy to lose the fun that you once had as a kid and lose the sort of the wonder and the magic of it all. And it gets lost in the anxiety and the pressures of it.
Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I think it's really interesting when you say that mentally it took a toll.
Well, you can't find a more pressure-packed career. I mean, outside of like extreme examples, professional athletics is anxiety producing of a job as you can find. And, you have to have thick skin because you're in the public eye and people are going to be writing bad things about you. People are going to say demeaning things about you, and that can shake your confidence. But ultimately, you put an entire lifetime into training for these sports. And in my case, the Olympics is 22 seconds. 22 seconds.
Really?
So you train your entire life for 22 seconds. And you can imagine the amount of pressure that 22 seconds creates. And so, yeah, it does take a toll. I think it takes a toll on every professional athlete.
That's heavy. And you ended up doing well in the Olympics. You got sixth in 2006, you got ninth in 2002. What do you do when you're standing in the start gate? You know that your whole career is coming down to 22 seconds. How do you mentally calm yourself, or how do you self-soothe, or how do you deal with that moment?
For me, it was this term called mind like a river. What that meant to me is I pictured this fast moving river going from the back of my head to the front of my head. And anytime a thought would come up, it would actually get swept away in this river. And created that because earlier in my career, I would have some of these self-defeating thoughts that I couldn't get out of my head by the time I pushed out of the gate. Everybody has these self-defeating thoughts like, oh, I'm going to crash on the top air, or oh, I forgot how to turn, or like, and so it really helped me to train this muscle of mind like a river. But everybody plays the mental game. That level, whether it's the NFL or Major League Baseball or basketball or the Olympics, if you're in the top 10, everybody's got the physical ability. What really
Hmm.
separates 10th from first is the mental gymnastics. And I always really enjoyed that part of the challenge because it was a lot more unknown than known based off going to the gym and working out your biceps. It's pretty easy to know how to do that, but working out your mind to be able to deal with those moments was a lot more complicated.
Well, I love the mind like a river ideology because that is very close to at least what I've learned about meditation is making sure you let thoughts go and you
Yeah.
can stay focused on what you want to stay focused on. So that's really cool that you're basically waking meditation as you are dropping into these super high pressure moments. So I am curious, you started at 15, and when did you leave the US ski team? What age were you?
That was after the Torino Olympics. So I retired really young in skiing. Retired at 23. Um,
Okay.
I retired at 23 and then was drafted into the NFL at 2 months later.
Which is amazing. And I have a couple more ski questions and then we'll get to that because I think that's just absolutely beyond exciting and unreal in a real way. So, what might have been some of your most memorable moments of your skiing career on the World Cup or any funny or scary or crazy stories?
I mean, it was just pretty surreal traveling the world with some of your best friends who, I made best friends as some of my teammates. Travis Cabral was my roommate, another incredible skier and Olympian and those types of things. And just having that sense of freedom, from being home and having a curfew. And, like I was in high
Yeah.
school, man. I was a freshman in high school when I made the US ski team. Still had curfews and stuff. Well, I didn't have a curfew in Italy. Junior Olympics or whatever. So, you grow up fast, but you also grow up with this global perspective in life. And I sometimes, meet people who have never traveled outside of this country that think that it's just the end all be all is the US and that we get everything right and anything that matters is here. And I think the more that you travel, the more you realize how much you don't know and how much you're eager to learn from others and experience and immerse yourself in other cultures.
I love that. I think Mark Twain has a quote that I'll butcher, but it's something along the lines of travel kills all forms of bigotry. So, whatever you thought
Totally.
about these people, you go there and you're like, oh, all right. Well, they're kind of just doing the same thing as we are. I like that a lot. So I think you said this already, but let's just reiterate. So when you retired from pro skiing, what was your reason?
My reason is because I wanted to give a shot in the NFL. I had two good football seasons for the University of Colorado. I was an All-American punt returner and receiver. The NCAA didn't allow me to play my junior and senior year because of all that name, image, and likeness conflict back then that has since resolved itself. So
Hmm.
I focused on skiing those 2 years and competed in the Torino Olympics and was dying to get back into football and try the next level. And then shortly after the Torino Olympics, 2 months after that, I was drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles.
Wow. What a hell of a good reason to end your pro skiing career is to go to the NFL. And your stats at Colorado University in Boulder are amazing. You had five career plays over 75 yards or longer. I think it tied you at the time for the most in school history or second most in school history. And you said that you played wide receiver and you were a punt return and kickoff return specialist. And you have multiple school records, including at the time you had the longest passing play, 94 yards, and combined return yards in a game at 250. And you said that you're All-American. You got drafted by the Eagles. And then I think you ended up on the Pittsburgh Steelers. So how did you balance skiing and football? You kind of told us that you did 2 years of skiing while you were in college and then 2 years of football. Was there ever a time that you were doing both at the same time?
Yeah, there was a time my freshman year in college, I played in the Big 12 championship football game and then flew to Finland the next day, competed in a World Cup, and then flew back for our bowl game, which was against Wisconsin in the Alamo Bowl.
Oh my
And
God.
somehow managed to take my finals somewhere around there too. So yeah, there was convergence across the two sports. And there was many times where coach or someone like that says, hey, you can't keep doing both. But I was able to navigate it to a place where I was able to do both at a high level. And those were just the two sports that I loved the most. I idolized John Elway growing up in Colorado, and I always wanted to be like John, who was one of the best quarterbacks of all times for the Denver Broncos. And then we skied on the weekends. We lived about 2 hours from a ski resort. Our home mountain was Keystone, Colorado. We would just go up on the weekends. And I loved to ski. And then I saw the Olympics when I was 10. And it was at that point where I told my parents I want to ski in the Olympics and play in the NFL. And, both my parents have a healthy disregard for what's impossible. So they didn't laugh at me. They looked at me and said, well, you can do that if you put your mind to it and you go attack it. And so that's what I tried to do.
And you did do it, which is just incredible. What I don't understand is I get your skiing background. I don't understand your football background. Where did football come into your life?
Football came into my life as soon as I could walk. I mean, my dad was a
Oh,
Denver Broncos fan, and so we would always watch the games together. And As soon as he came home from work, we'd head right to the backyard to throw the football together. And my dad was my first football coach. He coached LMAA football, which is sort of like Pee Wee football. And we shared a deep love and admiration for the game. Now, not too many people looked at me as a football prodigy. I was always the smallest kid on every single football field I ever stepped onto. Playing college football at 5'9" and 169 pounds. But I was fast. And I think I was fast because I was so scared of how big they were. And so ran extra fast. And so I worked at it a lot, stayed after every day and showed up early and put the work in. And I always felt like I was working harder than everybody else and did more drills and caught more balls and lifted more weights and did more mental training. And that's just how I approached it. And through some great coaching and some dumb luck, was able to play at the highest level.
So you played high school football, all of that.
Oh, yeah.
And at the same time doing the ski career. I mean, that is hard for most of us to understand. That's incredible. And I love the idea of you playing a game, going to Finland for a comp in World Cup, and then coming back and playing a bowl game. I think these are the kind of things that are very formative in somebody's life because when you have gone through pressure like that, a lot of other things in life that stress a lot of us out as normal people, just they don't really get to you. You know what real stress and real challenge looks like. And so everything else in your life is kind of a 3 out of 10. And I guess let's just touch on the NCAA challenges that you mentioned. So, because you were a professional skier and getting paid, the NCAA had a problem with that, even though it wasn't in the football realm. Can you tell us more about this?
When I enrolled at the University of Colorado, I had just completed my Olympic year, which was Salt Lake, and I ended that year as the #1 ranked skier in the world. And so
Wow.
I, coming off the Olympics, coming off a world ranking #1, I had some endorsement opportunities. So ski sponsors, goggle sponsors, pole sponsors, apparel sponsors, and Olympic athletes depend on those sponsors to pay for their careers. I mean,
Hmm.
because there's no salaries, right? Nobody paying you a salary like baseball or football. And when I enrolled in the University of Colorado, the NCAA said, well, you can only play football here as if you don't have any endorsement deals because this is amateur sports. And I said, yeah, I totally get that. But Ricky Williams, who was a great running back at Texas, was making $1 million as a baseball player while playing amateur football for Texas.
Oh, wow.
And Drew Henson was a quarterback at Michigan making over $1 million playing baseball in an amateur. So the NCAA had precedent that you could be a professional in one sport and an amateur in another. But they didn't care. What you learn about the NCAA is there's the judge, the jury, and the executioner. Due process does not exist. And now they've been dismembered a little bit as far as NIL goes. But back then, they could just decide whatever they wanted. And so they made me forego all my sponsorship opportunities, which I did, tore up all those contracts, and played amateur, both amateur skiing and amateur football for 2 years.
Well, I'm so sorry they did that. It is unacceptable because the NCAA, we don't need to get into it. The NCAA makes so much money off of you, off of these athletes. And so I am glad that the NIL is now letting athletes make some money. But and it sounds like you also didn't play your last 2 years because of this. Is that right?
Correct. I just didn't have enough money after my freshman and sophomore year to continue skiing, and I really wanted to go for that second Olympics. So I told the NCAA, I'm not leaving. You're gonna have to kick me out of college if you don't want me here. I'm accepting endorsements because I want to try for the Torino Olympics. And they
Mhm.
waited 9 months right before fall practice in August, then to de declare me permanently ineligible.
Oh, that's brutal, man. Well, I do not forgive them for that. It's unacceptable in so many ways, and we don't need to get into it, but it's just this is somebody who has such a great, amazing opportunity. And not only that, but an awesome team member and putting up numbers, and you're going to do this to him. It doesn't make any sense. But it was all about money, and that's what it's still about. So let's transition. Speaking of money, let's talk about business and leadership, because this to me is maybe the most impressive piece that you're this pure athlete and it sounds like you obviously had time for studies and all these things, but you really didn't have a lot of time for it. You were doing so much comps, you were playing ball, you were flying all over the world, and then you retired, you start a company and it just goes off. Could you tell us about this company and when you started it, and how did you know how to do this? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, nobody knows how to do it until you learn. And I've always had a beginner's mindset, never afraid to sort of jump into the deep end and figure out how to swim, and never afraid to jump out of the airplane, assemble the parachute on the way down. So I've always had a lot of confidence in my work ethic and my ability, and not just my ability, but a team's ability to go execute a difficult vision. But I think it started for me when I was in Philadelphia with the Eagles. I went to Wharton, which is the business school at Penn, through an NFL program.
Which is the number one business school in the US. Continue.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and through the NFL program, I got in and it was an incredible program. And it was really there where I got inspired to get into tech. And so when I left athletics, I worked for a company for 9 months in customer acquisition marketing and, learned a lot there. And then left to start a company to solve a bunch of the problems that I experienced in that role. And then, it wasn't, I like to call that business an overnight success 10 years later, because like it wasn't obvious early on, but it was a really interesting opportunity and experience to knock on the doors of all these venture capitalists. And the fact was not lost upon me that as soon as I was walking in, somebody else was walking out, and that person walking out was like an MIT grad or an HBS grad that, sold their first company for whatever. And here I am walking in there as like the token skier football dude that's going to go to an enterprise software company of all things. It was an uphill battle. I think I probably got 75 no's. But all you need is one yes. And Foundry Group here in Boulder is an institutional venture firm that said yes. They gave me $4.5 million to go try to build this vision. They just bet on me and not less on the idea. And yeah, I mean, we, over really a 7-year period, we built a company from $0 of revenue to over 9 figures of revenue on an annual
Wow.
basis. Sold the company for a great number, big number in 2021 to a great private equity firm by the name of Audex, Boston-based firm. And then 3 years working inside of Audex on my company as a CEO and learning from some of the most brilliant company builders in the world. So it really was a crash course, great experience, 10 plus years of growing and scaling both venture-backed companies, but also private equity businesses as well.
It's just insane to me, man, that you took a company from 0 to 9 figures. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but usually companies sell for about 3 times what their revenue is. So if you do that math, that was a really healthy exit.
Yeah, no, it
Um,
was a big 9 figure exit and it was great. The most rewarding thing was for the team to see how that it's not just me and investors, it's the whole team. Everybody had equity. So some people paid off car loans, some people paid off school loans, some people paid off house loans, and some people don't need to work anymore. So it was really cool to see that part of it.
Well, I'm guessing you don't need to work anymore, but instead you're out there grinding super hard, which I love. And you started a philanthropy company, or no, I guess you call it a philanthropy
The
nonprofit
charity. Yep.
with charity. Yeah, Wish of a Lifetime. Could you tell us about this?
Yeah, and Wish of a Lifetime grants wishes to 80, 90, and 100-year-old people. And it's just the most fun, exciting, rewarding journey of my life. We're almost 20 years old, and
Geez.
we've granted thousands of wishes. In fact, we're granting now about a wish per day. And these are incredible people. And these are unfortunately people that society has sort of given up on. People don't visit them anymore, and society doesn't value their dreams. And in some cases in our culture, unfortunately, we put the aging population where we can't see them and sort of out of the way. But we think of it very differently. We think these are our cherished heroes inside the fabric of our society, and their contributions to our world are immense. I mean, these are the people that pulled this country out of the Great Depression. These are the people that paved our roads. These are the people that fought bravely on the beaches of Normandy and the boats of Pearl Harbor in World War II. And so it's been an incredible journey, knocking on their doors and saying, hey, that thing you've always wanted to do in your life? Let's go do it. Let's go make it happen.
Oh, it gives me the warm prickles all over, man. I love that. And what inspired this? What made you want to focus on older folks?
Two things. The first was my relationship, my incredible relationship with my grandparents. And then the second thing was traveling the world and seeing how other cultures do this, how
Mm.
other cultures think about the aging. I mean, I mentioned the first time I left the country, I went to Japan. I was sitting on a really crowded bus inside of Tokyo, and I watched probably an 80 or 90-year-old woman start slowly walking on the bus. I watched everybody get out of their seats, help her onto
Ah.
that bus, and make sure she had a seat before that bus moved. And then they all bowed to her, like bowed to her. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. Like I wish my grandparents had that level of respect and admiration. And so it was really moments like that in Japan and through my travels and pursuits on the US ski team and these other countries that really formed that idea.
Wow, well, great idea. I've never actually heard of people focusing on older folks, and I agree. We have not cast them aside completely, but it feels that way sometimes. So I'm really happy to hear that you guys are helping them out. Speaking about your grandparents, talking about your family is really interesting because your sister ended up being maybe even more famous than you with her great movie Molly's Game and her book. If our listeners don't know, it's a cool movie called Molly's Game. I'm pretty sure it's off of the book that she wrote.
Yep.
And Jessica Chastain is in it, who plays her. Idris Elba, Kevin Costner, Michael Cera, Jeremy Strong. I mean, this is like an all-star cast. Movie ended up, I think, being a pretty big hit. I thought it was fantastic. Tell me a little bit about your sister and what it was like growing up with her. And was it shocking to you that this all happened, that her life went this way, and she ended up with this big, successful story?
Yeah, for people that don't know the story, my sister built the largest underground poker game in American history.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Only to see it come crashing down by an FBI and federal indictment. And so, yeah, it was a really incredible story. My sister, who we grew up in a town that probably had more cows than people, but she always had her eyes set on the bright lights of Hollywood. And so when she graduated from college, she moved to Hollywood, not knowing a single person, started working at a iconic club called the Viper Room.
Hmm.
And the owner of the Viper Room loved to play poker. And he would get his friends together and they would play in this dark, cold basement of the Viper Room. But my entrepreneurially oriented sister saw an opportunity and she said, "Why don't you let me run this game for you?" And he's like, "Okay, do that." And then, really, at its height, she was renting out the penthouse, the Four Seasons in Beverly Hills. She would only invite 8 players. She had a list of probably 500 players, if not 1,000 in LA, who wanted to get into her game every Tuesday. But it was of the likes of Leonardo DiCaprio and Ben Affleck and Tobey Maguire and a bunch of hedge fund
Wow.
guys. And I would go to these games and it would just be absolutely incredible. Like amazing food, Four Seasons, A-list actors, everyone having fun, some people losing millions of dollars. Like
Yeah.
it was insane. And she was like making 50 grand a night just tips. So she was riding really high. And then Toby Maguire stole her game.
No
And
way.
yeah, so he stole her game in a really terrible way. So she had to move to New York. And then she moved to New York and started her game in New York, and it was a totally different game. It
Mm.
was a mafia game. I mean, you walk in
Oh,
there and it was a lot of mafia people, people you would never want to mess with.
right.
And turns out one of those mafia peoples were they were running a Ponzi scheme, and the SEC and FBI was investigating that person. And they tracked the money back to my sister's game and raided the game and arrested my sister, federally indicted her, and then she turned it into an incredible movie that Aaron Sorkin wrote and directed and had an all-star cast and just did incredibly well.
Wow. Thank you for giving us that background. I had no idea about the LA piece. Now I need to watch the movie again because I haven't seen it in a long time. That is just mind-blowing, man. How cool. And so you got to go to some of these games and you saw some of this in person.
Oh, of course. I mean, yeah, I went to a ton of games.
And
Yeah.
did you play or you just watched or like
Oh
what
no,
was
I
your
didn't I didn't play. I just wanted to go and watch. And it was such a cool experience. Just to be a fly in the room of those events was incredible.
Wow, how cool, man. This is pretty much the end of the show, but there was one question I did forget to ask you. And honest to God, when people say the word fast twitch muscle fiber, I think of you. And I'm just curious, when you hear fast twitch muscle fiber, what do you think of? Like, well, it feels like your whole body is made of that.
I think that's all I got.
Yeah,
I didn't
seriously, man.
Yeah, I don't think I got any of the other stuff. So I don't
Yeah.
know. That's just what I was born with. I feel a lot slower now. I think a lot of it departed me now at 42, but I was always really fast. I was always really quick and always really fast and could get out of the blocks faster than anybody else in track. And very few people could catch me on a football field. And I think that translated to mogul skiing too, because it's a quick twitch muscle sport as well. So yeah, it served me pretty well.
Jealous, man. I wish I had a hell of a lot more of that stuff. Well, Jeremy, this has been fantastic having you on the show. Like I said, you're one of my heroes, man. I love how fast and how quick you are. And that was always just something that was so fun to watch for me. I'm just curious, is there any advice here at the end of the show that you might want to throw to our listeners who are aspiring athletes or aspiring entrepreneurs?
Those shortcuts. I just don't believe in shortcuts. If you want it hard enough, I'll tell you the same thing my parents told me. You got to go attack it. You can't just dream about it. You got to figure out a way to attack it and work harder than anybody else. And I think when those things happen, you got a very good chance of realizing your biggest and best dreams in your life. So that would be my one piece of advice.
Thank you so much for your time and energy here today, Jeremy. I really appreciate it. It's been so cool learning all this. Thanks for sharing stories about your family too. And I hope you have a great rest of the day, man.
My pleasure. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the SnowBrains podcast. If you like this podcast, please share with friends and family, and please make sure to subscribe. To find out more about SnowBrains, please visit us at snowbrains.com. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and more. This episode of the SnowBrains podcast is brought to you by Club Med. Ditch the hassle and embrace the freedom of an all-inclusive ski vacation with Club Med. Their resorts in the European Alps and Canada offer the perfect blend of exhilarating skiing, exceptional service, and worry-free pampering. Enjoy having lift tickets, delicious meals, lessons for all ages, and endless apres-ski fun, all included in one price. While the kids are having a blast at the supervised children's clubs, you can focus on mastering your skiing skills and creating unforgettable memories on and off the slopes. Visit www.clubmed.us or call 1-800-CLUB-MED or call your travel advisor to experience skiing without limits. This episode of the SnowBrains podcast was edited by Liam Abbott. Music by Chad Crouch. And I'm your host, creator, and director, Miles Clark.